Alright, so to get started, we are going to open up the HUD widget. Once you have it open, all we're going to do is come up here and search for Canvas panel, just like this, and drag this out into the HUD. Now, I am unsure if I mentioned this in the last part, because I had to remove a lot of the stuff out. But if you already have a HUD, you don't need to make a new one. This is just covering everything. So if you already have one set up, feel free to use that one. But regardless, compile and save, and we can close out of this. Next, we're going to set up the most important thing first, which is the inventory. So open up your WBP inventory. Alright, once it's opened up, we're going to come up here in the palette and search for an overlay, which this is sort of like a canvas panel, except it's meant for like overlaying on top of other UI elements. It essentially just lets you store multiple things inside of it, similar to a canvas panel. But yeah, inside of this, I'm going to add a vertical box. So search for vertical box, and then I'm going to add another one as well. Make sure they're actually both part of the overlay and not stacked inside each other. Both of these vertical boxes, I'm going to come over here and set their horizontal alignment to fill on both of these, on horizontal and vertical. Now this top vertical box will be used for the background image of our inventory. So if you want to use just one image for the entire background, then you don't really need a vertical box. You can just use one image. But the reason I have two is because I'm going to be using two images. But anyways, come back up here and search for image and drag this out right into your vertical box. And then I'm going to click this image. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to name this top background image. And as you can see right here, it's automatically checked is variable. I'm going to uncheck that because my background image will not ever be changing. Alright, so as you can see, the image is kind of too thin. So I'm going to adjust the image size over here. I'm just simply going to set it to 100 by 100. And after you do that, as you can see, it thickens up the top image a little bit. So next, I'm going to drag in another image into this same vertical box. And as you could probably guess, I'm going to name this bottom background image. And same thing, uncheck is variable. And this one's real easy. For the size right here, you can just hit fill, and it'll automatically fill out the inventory. And for both of these images, I already have a simple material created with instances right here. It's just a simple material. All I did, I can maximize this real quick, and all I did was change it to a user interface material right here, and it's still opaque and everything, and it's just a texture sample that switched to a parameter. And then I took a texture coordinate, masked out the RNG components, and then multiplied for the tiling, and converted these two parameters as well, and then appended them back together and plugged it into the UV. So it's a very simple material, and I just created two instances out of it. One is called MI top background, like this. The other one is called bottom background, and as you can see, it's the oak color. These aren't too fancy. They're just little placeholders, so feel free to use your own art and everything. It's just showing you how you can not make it look so basic. But anyways, that's all we need to add to this vertical box. This bottom vertical box, we will need a text. So come up here to the palette and search for text and drag out a text right here. And I'm going to come up here and name this inventory text. And it doesn't need to be a variable because it won't be changing. And then for the alignment, I'm just going to center and center. And for the text value right here, I'm just going to say inventory. And for the text size right here, I'm going to set this to 64, just like that. Next, to add the scrolling for the inventory, I'm going to come up here and add a scroll box. And this is going to go in the bottom vertical box as well. And of course, you can adjust your scroll bar thickness and all of this. But I'm just simply going to hit fill, and that should fill out the whole bottom area. Next, we're going to need a grid panel, and we're going to need a uniform grid panel, and put this in the scroll box. This is going to actually store each individual inventory slot. And for this, I'm going to set these alignments to left aligned and top aligned. And as you can see, the box should be super tiny right over here in this corner. This is because as inventory items are added, we want this box to stretch out and change its size as stuff is added. But anyways, just for a little bit of spacing, I'm going to set the padding to 10. And remember, all these values are customizable, so you don't have to use the same values that I'm using as well. But for the min desired slot width, I'm going to do 150, and I'm going to do 150 on the next one as well. And that is for the height. And one last thing I almost forgot, this needs to be a variable, and I'm just going to simply rename this to grid panel, just like that. And now if we come over here to the graph, we can go ahead and add the interface that we created for this inventory system. So come up here to class settings, go to implemented interfaces, and add your BPI inventory right here. And as you can see in this interfaces tab, all our functions are now popped up that we can use. We're not going to be getting into setting these up in this episode, because we're still setting up the widgets themselves. But it's just good to go ahead and get this in here. So now you can just be sure to compile and save. And that is all we need for the inventory widget. So next, open up your item slot right here. Once it's opened, we're going to come up here and change this off of fill screen to desired. And what this is essentially going to do is let us take advantage of size boxes. So we're going to be able to accurately determine how big our inventory slot will be everywhere it shows up, essentially. So this widget, no matter where it's at, it'll be the same size. So I've already mentioned a size box. So go ahead and just search for size box, drag one in. And as you can see, it's super tiny right there. And on our screen, it would also be super tiny. So for the width and height override, I'm going to set these to 200 and 200. Alright, so now that we can control how large we want this, remember we need something that allows us to stack multiple items. Because if we just drag, let's say we drag a text into here, and then we try to drag another text, it doesn't allow us to do that. So, like I was saying before, we need our overlay once again. And this will allow us to stack multiple things in here. So now the first thing we're going to add in here is a image. So search for image and drag this into the overlay. And once again, we're going to rename this. And this is actually going to be our background, just like the inventory. And uncheck is variable because this will not change. Next, we're going to set the horizontal alignment to all the way across and fill vertically as well. And here, this is where you set your background image for your inventory slot. I already have a T_slot background right here. That looks like this. And all of this is I went to a royalty-free image site, downloaded a royalty-free wood texture, and it was already grayish like this. And then all I did was I went to a Photoshop site called Photopea, and all I did was add a bevel to this. So it's real simple to make, and if you don't have this texture, then you could just simply look for anything. You could use just any texture in here as placeholder, like T-rope right here you could use. But because I outsourced this from a website, I don't really want to share it just in case. So if you want this image, unfortunately you'll have to make it yourself. But again, it took like 2 seconds. But I'll leave a link in the description where I got the texture. But next, we're going to need a border. So just search for border and drag this into the overlay. And just like the background, this is going to be fully filled out like that. And we're going to make this a variable because this border is going to represent our rarity that we store for each item. So if we don't have an item in this at all, we don't want to show the border at all. And we want to change the color according to the rarity. So I'm just going to name this outline border. Just like that. Or you can name it rarity border, whatever you want. So next we need another image. So drag this into the overlay. This will be called icon, and it will need to be a variable. And on this, we're going to stretch it all the way across like the rest. But we're going to add some padding. And the reason we're adding padding is so that that border that we just added can show up around the edges. And last but not least, we're going to need a text like this. Drag this into the overlay. And I'm going to call this quantity text. And again, this will need to be a variable. And right now we really can't see it. So I'm going to change the color to black. And then the alignment, I'm going to align it to the left, how it is right here on the horizontal. And then for the bottom, I'm going to align it on the bottom like this. Next, on the left alignment right here, I'm going to set this to 10. And then for these other ones, I'm going to set it to 1, just to bump it up a little bit. For the text block, we can see how this will look. So just set like your largest number. So if you can have like 100,000 things, add a bunch of 9s. But I'm just going to do 999 because that's a reasonable amount of items. And now according to your number, you want to set your text size. For me, I find for like 999, I find about a text size of 36 to be good. And as you can see, if we hover over the icon, which is that blue border you see, this number will appear right in the bottom corner of that icon. And so yeah, that is the inventory slot completed. All we have to do is compile and save, and we can move on to the next one. Alright, so for the next one, we're going to do the item label. Once you have item label open, go ahead and set this to desired once again. And on this, we're going to need a size box. And the width override, I'm going to set to 400. And the height override, I'm going to set to 150. So it's a rectangular shape like this. Next, instead of an overlay, I'm going to add a border to this. But your border should be all set up how it needs to be. Except I'm going to set the R and the G and the B to 0. I'm going to set the alpha to 0.5 so that you can see through it a little bit. Next, just like before, I'm going to add a vertical box. And for some reason it added a padding value right here. I'm just going to set that padding to 0 because we don't want padding. And basically you don't have to do anything in here if it's already set to fill on both ways. And next we are going to add a text to this vertical box. Like that. And we are going to call this name text and make sure it is a variable. And we are going to center it on the horizontal alignment. And I'm going to change this default value instead of text block. I'm going to just call it item name like that, the default text. And again, this will be changing, so that's why we mark this as a variable. So like these vertical boxes and stuff won't be changing at all. So you don't want those to be variables. And lastly in here, we're going to add another text. And instead of auto, set it to fill. And we are going to call this details text. And once again, set this to a variable as well. And for the default text right here, I'm just going to say item details. Just setting this allows you to quickly look at this at a glance and sort of see what information these texts are storing without really having to look over here. And this item label is going to be what pops up whenever you hover over an item. So if you want to add more information in here, feel free. You want to add some like icons and stuff, feel free. But this is just what's going to pop up when you hover over an item. So now we can compile and save this. And that is all we need to add in here. So next we're going to do the context menu. So open this up. Once it's open, you already know the drill by this point. Set it to desired so we can control the size and add in a size box. And this context menu will be whenever we like right click an item and we want to say drop all, we want to drop a certain amount, or we want to use the item. This context menu will control stuff like that. So we will definitely have multiple things in here. So make sure you do a overlay in your size box. And I almost forgot the size box width and height override. For the width, I find a value of 200 to be good. And for the height, a value of 100. So next, just like with everything, we need a image. And this will be our background image. So just drag it into your overlay. And it doesn't need to be a variable. And name this background image. And simply set it to fill like that. Next, we'll need a vertical box to organize the buttons. So search for vertical box. Put this in the overlay. And set its alignment to fill and fill. Next, we'll need the buttons themselves. I'm only going to add 3 buttons for this tutorial. So if you want to add more buttons, keep in mind you might need to change the size box size. Or if you want to add like better art or something, then just keep in mind you'll have to change the size box. And speaking of art, this background image, let's set this tint to like a gray color. Like set it to like 0.5 on all the values. Like that, like a nice little gray color. Maybe 0.3. That just makes it less vibrant, I guess. But yeah, search for a button, like I was saying before. and drag out this button and put it into the vertical box so it can be stacked. And I'm going to name this button Drop All Button. And I'm going to set it to fill like that. I'm going to set its padding to 5 so it brings it in off the edge. For the normal style, I'm just going to basically leave this the same. For the hovered style, I'm going to darken this value a little bit, bring it almost to black, but not exactly black. And then for pressed, I'm going to bring this all the way to black, like that. Next, I'm going to search for a text, like this. And I'm going to drag this onto the button, like that. And I'm going to call this Drop All Text. And it does not need to be a variable either. And its padding, I'm going to keep 4 and 2. But then I'm going to fully do fill on it, like that. And for the text value, I'm going to say Drop All in all caps, like that. And I'm going to change its color to solid black. And its size, I'm going to set to 16 as well. Oh, and one last thing I almost forgot, its justification down here, I'm going to set it centered like that. Just so it's like in the center of the button. So next, what's going to save a lot of time instead of dragging out and resetting all this stuff that we set, it's just a little bit of stuff we want to change. So you can select your button and your text, Control C, and paste it again into your vertical box, like that. And I'll add another one. And this drop all button underscore 1, I'm going to set to drop amount button. In the text on here, I'm going to say drop amount text. In the text, I'm going to say drop amount, like that. And then once again, on the vertical box, hit Control V. And this last button down here, I'm going to set this to use button. And the text is going to be use text. And the text is going to be use. Oh, and one thing that I forgot to do, it was kind of sneaky in my little notes over here, is on the translation for all these texts, set it to -4 on all the text. You gotta do it 3 times, but you can do it in like 2 seconds. As you can see, I'm already done. And that just perfectly centers them up. And as well, this background image, I'm gonna make mine a little bit darker so that you can really see these buttons. I'm gonna do like 0.1 maybe. 0.1, 0.1, 0.1. And that's a lot better. So now we can compile and save this. And that is the context menu done. Last but not least, we can open up the drop amount menu. And inside of here, set it to desired, like the rest of them. And again, drag in your size box, and then a overlay. And what this drop amount menu is going to do is, whenever we select the drop amount option in the menu that we right click, this will be the menu where we can type in how much we want to drop. So for the size box, I'm going to do the width and height overrides, and I'm going to set it to 200 by 60. And then the overlay doesn't need anything changed on it. And like all of these other ones, I'm going to add an image for the background. Uncheck is variable, and I'm going to call this background and set it to fill and fill. And again, I don't really have a texture for this, so I'm just going to set it to a dark gray color, just about like that. And next, I'm going to search for a vertical box, because we use a lot of these. Drag in vertical box, put this in the overlay, and stretch it all the way across in both axes. And inside this vertical box, I'm going to add a text, and I'm going to come up here and call this display text. It doesn't need to be a variable, but the text is going to be amount, colon, and it's going to be centered and fill vertically. Instead of 16, or instead of 24 on the sides, I'm going to set it to 16 like that. And that is all this text needs. So next, I'm going to drag in a editable text right here. And I'm just going to name this text field. And this will need to be a variable. Alright, so once you have this dragged in, come down here into font and just set the font to about 21. And then it will fit perfectly in here. And then you can compile and save. And so yeah, while we still technically don't have anything displaying because this is the finished product. If I pick stuff up, this is the finished product. We don't have anything really displaying yet, but we're one step closer to getting to that step. And pretty soon, everything in this will start piecing together really quickly. So yeah, if you enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe for more, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.